Hello and welcome to this panel discussion, Sharing Payment Innovation from Across Jurisdictions, as part of Payments Canada Summit 2024. I'm your moderator for this session. I'm Ellie Duncan, the Head of Content at Open Banking Expo. And before we go round and get to know our panellists, I'll introduce today's topic. So I'm pleased to be joined by a panel of global payment leaders. They're here to share their success stories and some of the key learnings from what's been a really transformational year in payments. So we'll be hearing from our speakers about what modern payments looks like in each of their jurisdictions. So that's across North America and Canada, Australia and India, respectively. And we'll also discuss how payments are creating new opportunities for growth, innovation and inclusion, as well as some of the key sort of factors that are underpinning the payments of the future, all the way from sort of data to security. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our panelists, or rather turn to them so that they can introduce themselves. So Katrina, over to you.
Thanks, Ellie. It's great to be here. So Katrina Stuart, I look after real-time payments and bill payments at Australian Payments Plus, which is our domestic payments organisation.
Thank you. And Kevin?
I'm glad to be back. Hi, my name is Kevin O'Neill. I lead Swift's activities in Canada. Swift has the privilege, but also the challenge to work across over 200 different jurisdictions around the world when it comes to things like payment, securities, foreign exchange, and trade. Looking forward to our conversation.
Great, thank you. And last but by no means least, Ritesh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ritesh Shukla, and I'm CEO for NPCI International. NPCI International is a wholly owned subsidiary of National Payment Corporation of India. And amongst many solutions, we also run and operate UPI, Unified Payment Interface in India. And I'm really looking forward to the panel today. Thank you.
Thanks, all three of you, for those introductions. Great to get to know you more. And well, look, as I said in my introduction, 2024 has been something of an enabling year for modern payments. The foundation has been laid for data-rich payments with ISO 222 adoption and awareness. Payments are getting faster, we know that much. There are new players in the ecosystem and users have really embraced new, particularly digital options at an accelerated rate. So my first question to all of you, and I'll come to you first, Kevin, on this one, is what does payment innovation look like in each of your jurisdictions?
Thanks, Ellie. Around the globe, we see innovation at varying pace, which is in a lot of inspiring innovation, from the very simple innovation, like being able to track payments, to more disruptive innovation and looking at how do you make sure that you're taking the most advantage of technology. We do see progress continuing in adoption around things like ISO and richer data. We see abundance of different platforms around the world. But what we also see is that it's also hard to retire systems. Nothing ever goes away, I think I said last year. Coexistence is here to stay. And how do you make sure that you are innovating responsibly, but also leveraging components, because you can't completely change when you're moving billions of dollars or trillions of dollars around the globe overnight. So responsible innovation is key, and making sure that you have a proper plan around rolling out initiatives in a responsible manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea of responsible innovation. Ritesh, what does innovation look like in India?
So I think if you look at our organization, innovation is a super important element in how we conduct our business. And given the evolution of digital payments in India, which NPCI has been driving along with the support from the entire ecosystem, it's important that we keep adding new solutions. And the underlying thought process of the driving force is how do we create more value? How do we create more value for our consumers, for our financial institutions, fintechs, regulator, and how do we deliver more? Now there is there are two key aspects of it. I think one is how do you displace cash even more? How do you displace cash faster? And how do you bring more and more transaction volumes on the digital payments rail? I think that's one underlying philosophy or underlying objective. And the second is how do you get more consumers on your platform? And both would require creating new use cases. Both would require simplifying user experiences. And we are moving forward with these as our guiding principles. And if you look at last 6 to 8 months, I think we've launched a couple of two new things that I would like to talk here. Is one is voice-based payments, and this is something that's an evolving field. Many people are working across the world. I think there has to there is a lot of focus on this. And if you look at evolution, how payments have evolved, like from being a very traditional way to touch based, and now I think we see future is going to be voice based over a period of time. So we are looking at doing a lot of things in that domain. And the another interesting thing which very well aligns with the cash displacement strategy is we recently launched something called credit on UPI. So this is basically enabling businesses get access to working capital and business loans. So imagine a situation that using your different UPI powered apps, I, as a business owner, can look at the options that are there for me to take that business loan or obtain working capital finance. And then it sits on my UPI app as a funding source, and I'm able to use that for fulfilling my business requirements. So again, this is something which is very unique, and we see a lot of potential in this area. So amongst the various things that have happened, I think these are pretty noteworthy. And like I said, cash displacement and onboarding more consumers. I think these are the two underlying principles that we use to kind of get more out of what we have and create more value for the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Ritesh. Voice-based payments, that's a really interesting one. Maybe we can delve into that a bit more. Katrina, just coming to you, I guess some of those sort of innovations also ring true for Australia, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think what we've seen here in Australia is really building on our payment initiation service, Pay2, that I spoke a bit about last year at the summit. And what we've started to see is really some innovation around that in terms of how organizations have been using that in different ways, and what that's enabled from a customer perspective. So it's opened up the ability for retail investors to invest in gold, for example, or even into bonds, maybe in areas where previously it would have been very difficult for them to do that. But by using Pay2 as a digital way of initiating those payments, companies have been able to create those opportunities. And what we've also seen is customers actually kind of reinvent the customer experience as well in different ways. So one of my favorite examples has been in the area of pet insurance, funnily enough. So we've seen an organization who has completely re-engineered that process. So rather than my dog is needing to go in for surgery for broken leg, as it did a little while ago. And rather than sort of going through that claims process after the fact and working out how much am I going to get back from my insurer, they've actually reinvented the whole experience. As I'm standing there at the vet, I know exactly how much I'll get back. And actually the insurer will pay the vet directly. And I don't even need to go through that claims process. So completely re-engineering customer experiences, which I think has been really exciting. The other kind of main theme that we've seen here in Australia has really been more around, I would say, payments modernisation, where we're looking to see how do we actually migrate our kind of legacy batch payments over to the MPP and real-time payments, and what that means in terms of unlocking value as well, and how businesses and corporates can think about their payment processing and opportunities to increase processing efficiency and reduce kind of, what is fairly manually intensive kind of activities around exceptions processing because of the value that's in the data that can be carried with an MPP message. So that's been very exciting, and starting to also start on the cross-border payment journey as well. So we went live with our international payment service, which enables the inbound leg of a cross-border payment to happen on the MPP, and that going across the MPP rails to the ultimate beneficiary in real time. And I think that's the starting point of how we think about starting to interlink fast payment systems around the world as well. But doing those payments not just faster, but ensuring that they're kind of a better way to do cross-border payments, because we can carry more data in the payment message as well.
Yeah, and obviously we all know how important data is, something we're going to come on to talk about actually. I guess across, all three of you there, it was clear that, consumers, businesses are always at the heart of any kind of payments innovation. And we know that in spite of change, fundamentally, their expectations are pretty consistent. They want easier, smarter and safer payment options. So a bit of a two-pronged question here, and I'll come to you, Ritesh, first on this one if I can. So the first part of the question is, where do you see sort of commonalities in payment needs and expectations across jurisdictions? And then are there opportunities to collaborate to create efficiencies on a kind of global scale?
Thank you, Ellie. So let's start with what you or I as a consumer look from a payment platform, I think. There are 4-5 things I think that clearly stand out. And more so speaking from our perspective, our experiences that we've had. So I think one is payments. Payment should be frictionless, right? I mean, it's like there was a time before Uber came on the scene. It was so painful, right, to kind of hail a ride. Now with Uber, you have a seamless ride hailing service. So payment similar. It should be frictionless. Affordable, because if there are corridors wherein if you today want to send money, and from at least I'm talking from India perspective, the cost is as high as 10, 11, 12%. I think that's not sustainable, and nobody is going to bring in scale if you do that. So payment should be affordable. Then what we have also seen is how do you democratize payments? So everyone should have access to it. It's not the select few, which typically ends up happening in if you look at the cards world, not everyone gets a credit card, or so your credit history has to come in the picture. So we should have a democratized way of offering payments. It should be safe. Because if it's not safe, you cannot win the trust of the consumer. And if you don't have the trust, nobody's going to use it. And finally, I think ubiquitous. It should be everywhere, anywhere, and all the time. So I think these are 4-5 things that I or anyone as a consumer would look for in any payment platform. And given today, if you see how different systems are wired up or lined up, for example, UPI in India may behave or is wired up differently than APP, for example, in Australia. So I think one of the biggest focus area or area to solve for is how do we standardize? How do we standardize the integrations that we are looking at doing? So we have kind of already connected UPI with Singapore. We are working with another country which should go live in a month or so. Then by the end of this year, another third country would go live. So we are learning from those experiences, trying to keep it low touch, building a lot of standardization. And at the same time, how do you create uniform user experiences? If I as a consumer today am sending to Singapore, my user experience for sending to Singapore should be same as what I'm going to use for the second or third country or fourth country when we go live. So I think for me, these are important areas, and I think we are working on those areas, and eventually I think we will solve for these areas as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ritesh. Kevin, coming to you next on this question, which is where do you see commonalities in payment needs and expectations across jurisdictions? And then the second part to that is, are there opportunities, do you think, to collaborate to create efficiencies on a global scale?
Thank you very much. And, to echo some of the comments from Ritesh, I mean, standardization and cost reductions are definitely key themes. I would add on top of that, reduction in fraud, particularly in the real-time world. And these are all areas that, are opportunities for collaboration, learning, and we're seeing that type of collaboration in response to the cost misdirected payments, reducing operational risk, reducing fraud, but also in response to increasing regulatory initiatives around the world. So these are all areas that that we see great collaboration around the globe on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great to hear. As you say, collaboration around fraud is becoming, increasingly a priority for many jurisdictions. Katrina, finally, let's come to you with the same question.
Very similar to some of my fellow panelists. I mean, I think increasingly people are expecting frictionless payments. They just expect the payment system to work and not kind of result in any issues for them. I think for businesses and corporates, it's also about how to start to really sort of embed some of the payments into other payment processes as well. And so how do you kind of then realize business efficiencies as a result of that? So bringing together payment with the procurement cycle as well. And particularly here in Australia, we're looking at how e-invoicing comes together with the payments process. I think, we touched on it, fraud and trust in payment products and services is really critical. That is a global issue that is impacting everybody around the world in similar ways. And how we look at opportunities to deal with that in our own markets, but also how can we learn from others as well, and some things that other markets have done. And it's been really great to actually be able to participate in a round of roundtable discussions with other markets to understand what people are doing there. And I think, it's about collectively, not just what the payments industry can do, but how we need to collaborate with others in other sectors, like in the telecommunications sectors as well, to help protect customers against fraud and scams. And how can we leverage some of the payment capabilities, in simple ways, because it's relatively simple, with things like confirmation of payee and actually seeing who I'm paying, because it's actually very powerful to know I'm paying the right person. And we know from some of our research that 1 in 4 users of our Pay ID addressing service have said they have stopped or edited a payment because they can see who they're paying. And I think also as an industry, I think where we'll see some future collaboration and development will be around the use of data. How do you kind of incorporate additional data elements around an account or in payment behavior that can indicate possible sort of fraudulent or scams as behavior? And how do we help prevent and stop some of that to protect consumers?
Yeah, I think that cross-sector sort of collaboration and learnings is really important, as you say, Katrina. Well, let's pick up on the theme that's really emerged actually from your answers there, and that's around sort of safety and soundness. So we know that obviously payments have to be efficient and frictionless, but not to the detriment of security and safety. Obviously, that is vital to underpin every transaction. So my question to you, and I'll stick with you, Katrina, if I can, is how do you ensure that payment innovation is supported by safety and security, and that you're not getting a kind of trade-off, as it were?
Yeah, and sometimes I think there can be a bit of an inherent tension in that as well, in terms of sort of how you can enable the innovation and allow that to happen, but how do you do that in a safe and a secure way as well? And I think coming back to our Pay2 service, that's something that we've really tried to balance very carefully. And it's been about, from a customer perspective, if I'm authorizing someone to be able to initiate payments from my account, then how do I do that? And we actually went down the path of saying, well, that needs to be done within the safety and security of my banking channel, because I have to authenticate myself in order to authorize those payments. And that has, kind of safety and security attached to that. And then for those organizations that want to be able to use the Pay2 service, how do we ensure that there are controls around, what type of organizations are accessing the service, how they do that as well, and then also how we think about the risk and the fraud as well, and manage that as an industry, because that's kind of really critical, I think, when you're trying to sort of balance innovation, where it's coming from, but also ensuring that safety and security. But it is a kind of a bit of an inherent tension, I think, in terms of trying to balance the two, because you also don't want to restrict people from using the payment systems and doing that innovation, but maintaining that trust and security is so vitally important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important point there. Kevin, how do you sort of go about striking that balance?
Completely agree with Katrina, and that's kind of table stakes for the industry. I like her use of the word tension. You know, One of the things we see with fraud, and Katrina talked about confirmation and pay, we've seen that rising up, and that's a great tool, but that's one of many tools. And so looking at user behavior, anomaly detection, application of AI types of tools to look for those patterns and trends, to look for that type of behavior, as well as making sure that people understand, and we've seen incidents of this in terms of the ecosystem, and making sure that when people outsource certain responsibilities, that they're doing that in a safe and secure way. So we're looking at working across the community with our member banks ecosystems, to how can we look at solving some of those challenges, looking for those global patterns that we see on the network, but increasingly looking across network as well around tracking and those types of things, to look for these types of patterns. Fraud and cyber risk is never going to go away. We always have to continue to raise the bar on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Ritesh, coming to you really with the same question. I mean, you spoke about some of those innovations at the very top of this discussion in India, the voice-based payments and so on. So how do you ensure that, you're able to innovate, but it's underpinned by safety and soundness and security?
So we have taken a layered approach to this whole piece, and for simplification purpose, I think I'll say that we have three broad areas. So one is onboarding of a consumer. So and let's take example of UPI. So when you download any app for participating in UPI payments, these apps are from the marketplaces like App Store or Google Play Store, right? So they're already there, certified from our side. And once a consumer has downloaded that app, then he or she has to connect it with the funding source, again using UPI, but that connection can only be established if the phone number on the device is the one that is registered with the service provider, like a bank or a financial institution. So if you're trying to register from a phone number that's not registered with your bank or a wallet or whatever, it will not go through, right? So how do you secure the entry into the ecosystem? I think that's one area. So around onboarding, and it's an evolving area. And like Kevin said, the one can never be comfortable in this situation because typically new things keep coming in. So how do you onboard is one. The other is once you have onboarded the consumer, then how do you control the transaction level risk when he or she is transacting? So that's where I think a lot of AI, machine learning, and all these algorithms and the experiences or the transaction behavior comes into picture. So how do you make your fraud and risk management platform or framework strong enough so that you're able to identify trends if there are any, and you're able to reflect that in your fraud and risk scoring for a particular transaction? So that's an ongoing process, and the intelligence keeps on building, and you kind of refine your models as you learn more. And I think the third is and it's equally important, is directly talking to consumers and creating awareness, like what are the things that one should not do, what are the things that one should do. And this is more of an ecosystem level play. We also do a lot of print, digital media around this. We hire some celebrities or people who are known faces, and kind of telling a common person on the street that these are things you should not be doing. For example, we started talking about last year that for receiving money, you don't need to part with your PIN. And for any reason, you should not part with your PIN, and particularly for receiving money, because there was a scam running that people were getting calls saying that you've got a lottery and you have 100,000 rupees, just share your PIN and we'll credit to your account. So we went into overdrive telling everyone that no, this is not true. These are scams that are going on. So we do a lot of these initiatives, and of course our regulator, Reserve Bank of India, they also do a lot of these campaigns telling people what to do and what not to do. So I think that's the overview of the layered approach that we have towards this.
I saw you nodding along there, Katrina. Is that consumer education piece sort of important in Australia as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really critical, I think, in terms of messaging to customers about what to be aware of, what to kind of be conscious of, and particularly that point about, sort of providing information or doing something in order to receive money is kind of a common theme that we've seen here as well. People being tricked into, you're selling something on a marketplace and, yes, I've made you that payment, but oh, you have to pay me first before I can release that payment to you. And it's, people just being aware that, something sounds a bit wrong, then take your time. Don't be tricked into doing something quickly. Sharing some of your personal information that can then be used to take money from your account. And I think reinforcing those messages from different sources actually is really, really important, because people need to hear it, I think, from different places, from their bank, from the market, from media, from, the regulator, just to kind of really reinforce to people about what they need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we're all used to the kind of the speed of change and innovation in payments, but yeah, from a consumer perspective, it can be kind of difficult to understand really, and to know what to trust and what not to. So really interesting to hear from all of you there about security and soundness. And I want to come on to talk about data, which is something that obviously is kind of underpinned this entire conversation so far, really. So among the biggest benefits of payment modernization is data-rich payments. Kevin, I'll come to you first on this one, considering that you're at Swift. So I want to find out how the payment ecosystem is making the most out of this data. It's all very well sort of having this data, but is the industry using it, and how is it using it really? So yeah, over to you, Kevin.
Thanks. So, I mean, I would also talk about the responsible use of data and frameworks to make sure that you're handling data responsibly from a data governance perspective. But we are seeing, and we're still, I would say, halfway through, or not quite halfway through, the journey of modernizing from an ISO perspective around the world. So we've seen great adoption in the market infrastructure space, close to 70%, where the cross-border space is closer to 25% right now. But we are seeing leading institutions and, that are looking to capitalize on the richer and more structured data for operational efficiencies, but also to provide better client experiences. And as we're investing in infrastructure, I'd kind of just touch back on some of the things that you're starting to see additional services that innovative firms and fintechs and things that can make available to end customers and consumers and corporations around things like liquidity management, or being able to see in what's going on with your information and your data. So still a lot of work to do, but some great progress that's been made. It is a focal point for the cooperative for the remaining of the coexistence period to 2025 and then beyond.
Mm. Okay, so we're getting there, and Ritesh, coming back to you really with this same question about whether you think the payment ecosystem is making the most out of sort of data-rich payments, and what more it can do. So yeah, Ritesh.
So I think, like Kevin mentioned, using data, one has to, ensure that a proper framework for every market, one should definitely look at abiding, because it's a thin line. But having said that, I think the way we are seeing it as the deployment is creating a lot of value. For example, for us as a network, it helps you better manage your fraud and risk management strategies. So you can use data to kind of identify a pattern in terms of fraudulent behavior or something, and you can quickly, go back and modify, alter your fraud and risk management practices, and ensure that you kind of are fulfilling your obligation of being a safe and secure network. I believe when it comes to financial institutions like banks, or I think it gives them ability to one is market, carry out marketing practices that are more aligned with the consumption behavior of the consumer. So I think it brings in a lot of sharpness, and consumers also feel I think comfortable, because you're not then spammed by a series of offers. You're only getting offers that you find are relevant to you. So that's, I think, one. So you can actually cater to the needs of your consumer better. The other thing we have seen emerge beautifully is that if you look at a small business owner or a medium-sized corporation, by leveraging their transaction data, they can demonstrate that what is their receivable position. And if you can demonstrate that your receivable position, I think the access to finance, access to credit becomes easier. And this is when there is a limited bureau score or whatever, because a lot of people, at least in our country, are still relying on unorganized sources of finance, and them being able to accept UPI transactions. It helps that credit entry or debit entry into your bank account helps you demonstrate that, yeah, no, this is my business turnover, and this is how I can be trusted, and I can get access to finance. So various use cases on the consumer side, on the exposure to new financial services, and also on the safety and security side. And I think we are, as an ecosystem, we are making a good use of it by residing within the framework that has been defined for data usage and data privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So data for sort of personalization, but also, in that kind of fraud piece that we've been talking about. Katrina, how is Australia kind of using data in payments?
I think we're just kind of really starting to scratch the surface here in Australia. I mean, we started off with the MPP moving from a kind of legacy payment message of having 18 characters to having 280 characters of unstructured data, including emojis, which has been great from a kind of retail banking customer perspective. So, I can make a payment to you, Ellie, and say, great to see you last night, really enjoyed dinner, smiley, happy face emoji, must do it again soon. But that's kind of a little bit limited in terms of, from a business perspective, what you can do with that. And so our focus here has been really about how do we start to utilize some of the structured data capabilities that are there in the ISO message, and really starting to get the benefit of that. But I think it's a journey with businesses and corporates, because it's not just what's carried in the payment message, but it's actually about businesses' ability to ingest some of that data as well, and what they do with it, and who's receiving the data at the other end, and how they can incorporate that into their downstream processes and systems as well. So it's a journey we're just starting to go on here in Australia. And as part of our migration work to move away from our legacy batch payments over to the MPP, we're really kind of looking at how do we do that in a way that does unlock more of the value around the data and start to realize some of those benefits, because I think they are kind of considerable, but it's going to take a bit of time, I think, to kind of make that change as an industry, because it's really about trying to have both sides of the kind of network operating from a data perspective, in terms of who's sending it and who's also receiving it. So we're just at the early stages of that, but hoping to see some benefits soon.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, lots of potential to be explored there. Well, I'm coming on to my final question for all of you now, which is, what payment trend do you think will have the biggest impact on your organization this year? So a bit of a forward-looking question. Ritesh, I'll come to you first.
If you look at our history since the beginning, and more so for UPI since end of December, end of 2016, the platform that we created, UPI, has literally transformed the whole payment ecosystem. And ever since launch, we've been adding new features, new benefits, and then but there's nothing like no one feature that you can say that, yeah, this is going to drive. So it's a combination of various things, is what I would say. And you may find my response boring, but I would say that the trend is more around embracing digital payments, and people don't want to carry cash anymore because it's outdated. So I think that's what is going to drive. We are looking at creating more user experiences. We are looking at we work beautifully with our partners, banks and fintechs. We call them TPAPs, third-party payment providers, like Google Pay, Walmart, PhonePe, WhatsApp, Amazon. So these are exciting times, and we are looking at serving our consumers. So I think we'll continue to pursue that journey. I'm sorry, I'm not able to call it a particular trend that will be, at the center of it, but I think it's a combination of many things that would, continue to drive digital payments.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, what do you think is going to be? Is there one trend that stands out to you, or like Ritesh, do you see that there's kind of convergence of kind of moving in that same direction really towards payments modernization?
So perhaps also boring, but I'm going to very much agree with Ritesh. There's no one thing, sadly. There's no silver bullet. There are lots of initiatives that everyone needs to pay attention to. We are not potentially consumer facing, but there are lots of tools to reduce cost, reduce friction, make things go faster, that we're going to continue to work with the community to drive adoption. But as I sit here in middle of 2024, if I had to highlight one item, it would of course be ISO 20022 in the cross-border space, and continued adoption of that. Very much related to all of the things we're talking around innovation and being able to take advantage of, but that adoption of ISO 20022, particularly from a payments perspective around the globe, is front and center of the cooperative's mind.
Yeah, of course. Katrina, same question to you.
Probably very similar to some of my fellow panelists. I mean, I think here in Australia, I think it's going to be about continuing to lay some of the foundations for the future, and in terms of modernizing our payment system. And so that's very much about how do you bring kind of, payments that are submitted in a bulk file format today over to a real-time payment system that basically clears and settles payments individually in real time, and what that means. Certainly a real focus on I think the trust, and how do we ensure that we maintain trust in our products, and particularly when you're talking about payments in the real-time world, and delivering capability around things like confirmation of payee, but trying to think about what's next and how do we start to kind of sort of future-proof for some of that as well, and continuing that journey, I think is really going to be a key focus for us here in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, it's great to hear from all of you about kind of what's on the horizon for you, and I think as throughout this discussion, we've had some really exciting bits from you about the innovation that's taking place in each of your jurisdictions, but also that piece about I think Kevin, you used this phrase like responsible innovation. So it's always got to be underpinned by that kind of security element, the consumer education piece, of course, and building that trust, as you were saying there, Katrina. So I know that there's lots going on in this ecosystem, so it's obviously a really exciting time to be a part of this industry. So my thanks to all three of you for what's been a fascinating discussion today. So thank you to Ritesh, to Kevin, and to Katrina. And that brings us to the end of this panel session. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion as much as I have. So all it leaves me to say is goodbye for now.